I think Mr. Jauhari joining us using participant link, so that's why he cannot show turn on his camera or audio. So we will wait for a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Einar.
Yes.
Your background is blue. So I think this is a sign that you will support Joe Biden, I think.
Well, not really, but yes, I am supporting him, but the color choice is just standard. I just need something behind me.
Okay.
I'm not a particular fan of Donald Trump, if that's what you're trying to get at. I don't think he's a big fan of mine. I say nasty things about him.
What is Pak?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Okay.
Welcome, Excellencies.
Sorry, I'm in Tanchong, Yunnan. So
Okay.
the network is not quite good here. Hi, Einar. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Okay, everybody. We're gonna start with Mas Jihan. please. Jehan.
Okay, Pak.
Yeah, please start.
Good afternoon, His Excellency Mr. Jauhari Oratmangun, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to People's Republic of China, His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piquet, Ambassador of the European Union to the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Ainar Tangen, CGTN Current Affairs Commentators, Mr. Ator Subroto, Directors of the School of Strategic and Global Studies of University of Indonesia, Mr. Komara Jaya, Senior Fellow from the School of Strategic and Global Studies of University of Indonesia. It is my pleasure to be a host for this webinar. I'm Zehan. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking time off your schedule to join us today in our first China webinar series with the topic China Growing Influence on Geoeconomics and Geopolitics, Impact and Consequence. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, to begin the event, we would like to invite Mr. Ator Subroto, PhD. He is the Director of School of Global and Strategic Studies, University of Indonesia. He has conducted several research that focuses on public policy, sustainable development, and risk management. Without further ado, we would like to welcome Mr. Ator Subroto to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Zian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Good afternoon, everybody. Especially our special guest, His Excellency Mr. Jauhari Oratmangun, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the People's Republic of China. His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piquet, Ambassador of the European Union to the Republic of Indonesia. Thank you for your time. And Mr. Ainar Tangen, CGTN Current Affairs Commentator. And also Mr. Komara Jaya, our Senior Fellow. And then, ladies and gentlemen who are following our webinar directly through Zoom and maybe also from the YouTube. And also, I would like to send my gratitude for the audience coming from LIPI, Indonesian Institute of Science, other faculty of University of Indonesia, and also maybe university from Australia as well. Indonesian diplomats in Indonesia and abroad, policymakers, private sector, and students. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, the School of Strategic and Global Studies, or SSGS, is a postgraduate program with a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary approach in the University of Indonesia, in Universitas Indonesia, to answer the challenge of strategic and global issue on the national and international stage, to research, teaching, and providing services to the community. China Webinar Series Forum has been initiated recently by our school in Universitas of Indonesia as the first stepping stone of establishing a research cluster for Chinese study, or RCCS. Because as we can see currently, China's role in a global society, politics, and economics and cultures is growing bigger and dominant in this time. The main objective of the China Webinar Series and the RCCS is to foster discourse, understanding, exchange of ideas among academia, intellectual, policymakers, the business community, civil society, and the general public about China's contemporary issues. China Web Series is the recurring seminar that will cover China, Indonesia, contemporary issues with interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary approach on social, culture, economics, and politics in the global and Indonesian context. In addition to this forum also aims to bridge Indonesia-China relations and facilitate deliberate discussion from various views in contributing the future production environment, not just for both countries, but also for global peace and prosperity. We may, as we may been experiencing this difficult pastime I call, today as the pandemic is still around here, we need to know of what others do and share, and how to collaborate, help each other in order to minimize its impact to our economy, social life, and health, and many other aspects through great collaboration. Once more, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we are all enjoy and take as much as possible benefit from this current webinar. School of Strategic and Global Studies continually support this kind of discussion to broaden our perspective on the strategic issues and global issues. Again, thank you very much and enjoy. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Ator. Ladies and gentlemen, moving right along, now we are about to start our main discussion with the invited panelists. You will have opportunity to join the discussion with today's panelists by typing your text question into a Q&A of the control panel. You may send in your question at any time during presentation. We will collect this and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's discussion. Next, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Mr. Komarajaya. He is a senior fellow at the School of Strategic and Global Studies in University of Indonesia. He received his master's degree in regional finance from University of Birmingham, UK, then pursued his PhD in economics from Iowa State University. His research focused on urban, regional finance, and economics. In 2004 to 2009, he served as Deputy Minister for Macroeconomics and Finance at the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs. In 1995 to 1998, he served as the Director of Institute for Economic and Social Research in Faculty of Economics, University of Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Komarajaya.
Thank you very much, Jehan. Let me iterate again to welcome to Excellencies Johari Ratmang, Ambassador of Indonesia in PRG, and also His Excellencies Vincent Piquet from EU representative in Jakarta. Thank you for joining us. And of course, Mr. Einer had Tangan as pretty, well-known CG global China Global Network actually, and I think everybody's aware that our topic today is kind of quote-unquote hectic issues everywhere, in addition to virus outbreak actually. Pandemic, because I think in the last 30 or 40 years, the performance of China is, everybody knows, remarkable, astonishing, everybody's, especially also in developed countries. And also right now is quote unquote hectic relation between China and United States. And that can be explored more by Einar, my colleague, and also the South Sea China case is kind of hectic in Asia and Southeast Asia. I think without any elaborate issues on that, because everybody's, or especially our panelists is expert on that field, let me invite first. Okay, let me telling everybody the rule. The speaker will perform a kind of 20 or 25 minutes. The first speaker is Excellency Oratmangun, then continued by Speaker Excellencies Pickett for 20 or 25 minutes. Then colleague Einar Tagen can present 20 or 20 minutes. After that, let us give a kind of a free room for the panelists asking each other. So the panelists can explore other topic, in terms of questions and answer. So that takes going to be 20 minutes altogether. Then we open the question and answer to the audience, because currently the audience is about 20 something, no, 60, but somebody watching also in the YouTube. First, I'd like to invite His Excellency Jauhari Oratmangun. Let me read short CV because it is pretty long. Ambassador Oratmangun is currently Ambassador of Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Indonesia to people of Republic of China and accredited to Mongolia. Before assuming his current position, he has the senior advisor on strategic issues to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Indonesia. And some important position already, every, corner of the world. The first, in 2012 to 2016, Ambassador Oratmangun is Russian ambassador and accredited to Republic of Belarus. That's 2012 to 2016. Before that, the previous position is 2009 to 2011 as DG, Deputy Minister for ASEAN Cooperation, especially Som Leader ASEAN. Then previously also as Ambassador Permanent Representative for Indonesia at interim, and also Deputy Chief of Mission, Charter Affair Indonesia Embassy at The Hague, Netherlands. And before that is so many positions actually. Excellency Oratmangun would like to present a kind of course, related to Indonesia and China, but can Mr. Ambassador share with us the growing productivity or economic activities in China and also to the global context? And then, of course, later on, in relation with the Asia, and also ASEAN, then of course to Indonesia. The times, I'm sorry, just 20 or 25 minutes, Excellencies. Please, Pak Jauhari, monggo.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Komarajaya, Ambassador Vincent Pickett in Jakarta, my dear friend, Mr. Einar, how are you in Beijing? Pak Subroto, greetings from Yunnan. I'm in Yunnan now, a small city near the border of China and Myanmar, because we just had a meeting here, bilateral meeting. I have to accompany Minister Luhut Panjaitan and Minister of Health, bilateral consultation with China. I will make a presentation maybe within 10 to 15 minutes only, because I would like to hear some views from Einar in particular and Ambassador Vincent Pickett. So let me start by elaborate on the bilateral relation between Indonesia and China. First, let me remind you about the 5 priorities of the Indonesian diplomacy expressed by Minister Retno during the press briefing in early January 2020. There are 5 priorities. Number 1 is strengthening the economy, or we call it economic diplomacy. Number 2, citizen and legal person protection. Number 3 is sovereignty and nationhood. Number 4 is Indonesia's global and regional role. And number 5 is strengthening diplomacy infrastructure. This is our internal issues. So how about the Indonesia and China bilateral relations? This year, in fact, we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the diplomatic relation between China and Indonesia, which was formed on April 30, 1950. So 70 years already. We would like to celebrate in Beijing, but due to the COVID situation, we postpone it. We celebrate it through virtual, like this one. So since 2013, we elevate our relationship from strategic partnership to become comprehensive strategic partnership, which gave birth as well to the economic growth projections that contribute to the to both countries' prosperity. And then I think this year and the years ahead will be the golden momentum projected as well for Indonesia and China relationship, in particular in the digital economy and digital technology, including big data, artificial intelligence, digital currency, through joint ventures. If you still remember, only a few days back, both central banks signed agreement on the collateral cooperation in using rupiahs and renminbi. So amidst the pandemic now, both countries continue to have a better cooperation in the medical equipments, vaccine, we call it vaccine diplomacy, vaccine cooperation, digital economy, and tourism. How about the performance? Because if we would like to see the economic cooperation between two countries, and I would like to see the performance as well. Back in the 2019, the investment coming from China to Indonesia increased by 95.6%. Trade up by 2.9%. So the volume of trade between two countries already reached 73 billion US dollars. That's in 2019. Import up by 5.5%. So we still experience deficit with China around 10 to 11 billion US dollar last year. And how about the first semester, or from January to August this year? Because we just received the data from customs here in China, the trade export, our export increased by 6.94%. So it's around 24 or 22 billion US dollar. That is from August from January to August. And then import from China declined by 10.83%, meaning that we can close the gap of the deficit. So the deficit decreased by 69%. If this trend continue until the end of this year, we would like to see that we can close the gap of deficit between Indonesia and China. And then the other thing is the, wait, let me check my notes. So why China matters for Indonesia? Because this is the question as well from the organizer. China rise has been driven, of course, by economic development. I think Einar can elaborate further on that. Starting with the launch almost more than 40 years ago of the president at that time, Deng Xiaoping, open door policy. First time I visited China, it was the year 1989. And then since 1999, I've been visiting China for more than 20 times. So I witnessed as well the development, the economic development of the People's Republic of China. So which now made China the economic powerhouse as is today, not just the most domestically, but internationally as well. On the world stage, China has become a strong player in such institutions like the United Nations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, WHO, World Trade Organization. So China moved forward to the multilateralism. China's growing economic influences has been anticipated since the birth of the Belt and Road Initiative as well. It was 5 or 6 years ago. And then since the COVID-19 pandemic that contracted the world economy, China's policy towards the world with the community of shared future has put China positioned to a new level now. We can all witness that. China's growing interest towards global issues such as climate change, poverty reduction, global health, governance, data security, anti-corruption, and sustainable development has put China towards a more empathetic society and presumably, I underline the word presumably, leading in the future. So what is the Indonesia-China bilateral focus in the year 2020? I put 3. Number 1 is war against COVID-19 we're experiencing for the last 9 months in terms of vaccine, research and development, distribution, and allocation. Number 2, economic recovery against the devastating impact of COVID-19. So I call it diplomacy economy with China. It's already reflected in the performance of our export, in the investment of China coming to Indonesia. For first semester this year, the investment of China already reached $2.4 billion US dollar, from Hong Kong 1.7. So put China plus Hong Kong become number 1 investor in Indonesia now. And number 3 is citizen and legal person protection between both countries. Now I would like to allude further on the Sinergizing Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and the Global Maritime Fulcrum. This is initiated by our president. So initiated in 2013, so it was almost 7 years ago, the Belt and Road Initiative intends to promote synergy among the development strategies of different countries, tap into the market potential within the region, promote investment and consumption, create demand and jobs, and increase people-to-people exchanges and mutual learning between civilizations, all in an effort to cultivate understanding and mutual respect among peoples of different countries and share a life of harmony, peace, and prosperity. If we still remember, back in the 2014, President Joko Widodo, our president, proposed the Global Maritime Fulcrum, GMF, vision, which reflects profoundly to the concept of the goals and areas of BRI. So how about Indonesia participation in the BRI? Back in the 2018, Indonesia and China, that was April 2018, signed a memorandum of understanding on jointly promoting cooperation within the framework of Global Maritime Fulcrum vision and the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Road Initiative. So we call it within the program of Indonesia and China Sinergize of GMF and Belt and Road Initiative. What was the progress made? I think it's already reflected. We at the time agreed on the 4 economic corridors. Number 1 is in North Sumatra, number 2 in North Kalimantan, number 3 in North Sulawesi, number 4 in Bali. Some projects already in place to include Jakarta-Bandung fast train. Let me now move and allude a little bit on the ASEAN outlook in the Indo-Pacific, because this is one of the issues as well. The Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions are amongst the most dynamic in the world, as well as centers of economic growth for decades. As a result, this region continued to experience geopolitics and millions of people. On the other hand, there are material powers. For instance, economic and military requires avoiding the deepening of mistrust, miscalculation, and patterns of behavior based on a zero-sum game. So what was the ASEAN outlook into the Indo-Pacific envisioned by ASEAN consists of the following key elements. We remember this is the proposal of Indonesia and now become ASEAN outlook of Indo-Pacific. Number one, a perspective of viewing the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions not as contiguous territorial spaces, but as a closely integrated and interconnected region, with ASEAN playing a central and strategic role. An Indo-Pacific region of dialogue and cooperation instead of rivalry. An Indo-Pacific region of development and prosperity for all, and the importance of the maritime domain and perspective in the evolving regional architecture. So this is the ASEAN and China focus. First, number one was war against COVID-19. Number two, COVID-19 vaccine to be the global public goods. Number three, maintaining and improving economic projection. ASEAN trade with China has increased almost 6% amidst the pandemic. Southeast Asia trade with China around $650 billion annually. It's almost double its trade with the United States. Managing complex yet growing multidimensional cooperation, and then, of course, a solid partnership where peace, cooperation, progress prevail. So, conclusion, there are 4 points: mutually beneficial, added value towards common bilateral and multilateral goals, opening up and transparent, creating confidence, building measures in the region. In 2 words, cooperation and collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Murat Pangun. It's very, very, comprehensive issues you are discussing actually, and we are very thankful for your sharing with us all the strategic issues between China in the global stage and also in Asia and in Indonesia. Before I go on, I like to welcome everybody in the audience. I forgot, sorry, not to say hello to all of you. Thank you very much for your time sharing with us. Probably this webinar would motivate you to explore more Indonesian with China and even China with the global issues. I think University of Indonesia, either in Fakultas Ilmu Sosial and Politik and also Fakultas Ilmu Budaya, Economy and others, are going to have a big, potential role to explore, because in China is 1.4 billion plus 260 million. Indonesia, that's almost 1.8 billion. If we are working together, a kind of win-win outcome, that's going to be good for everybody. And the ambassador discussion on or sharing China international relation with Asia, but you haven't talked about the US, right? Probably Einar going to share with us later on. This is very, very interesting. And economic progress, but the other one is
ambassador to China, so I would love to talk about Indonesia and China.
Right, agree. And also the nice thing is on the other sides of the economic issues, kind of COVID outbreak, economic recovery, and citizen legal protection. That's very interesting, I think, for our colleague in Fakultas Hukum. Now, we would like to shift a bit how the European colleague to see Asia and also China. My observation with my student, I think in the last 10 or 15 years, especially in economics, export and import any country from the EU is very, very fantastic increase with China. So I just teasing my colleague, Indonesian colleague, if you don't want to go to China, a trading partner, export, import, and European colleague is ready to tap all of the progress of China's made. But of course, that's from, my class, but I don't know from Ambassador Pickett looking at this. Probably Ambassador Pickett would like to share later on. But let me share with participants the short curriculum video of Ambassador Vincent Pickett. He is currently head of delegations in Indonesia. Before that, and of course, Brunei Darussalam. Before that, his post is delegation for Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, Middle East, means North Africa. North Africa Department in European External Action Service in Brazil. 2012, 2016, Ambassador Pickett is head of European Union office in Hong Kong and Macau administrative region. I think he can share with us the experience because Hong Kong is belong to China, right? Not like Taiwan. 2008, 2012, Ambassador, head of delegation EU to Malaysia. So that's why Ambassador Pickett knowing very much to some extent about Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And also 2005, 2008, head of unit, Central Asia Operation for Asia and Central Asia. I think after breakout of the Soviet Russia. I think our session now is going to be very interesting to listen to Ambassador Pickett's experience and analysis of European colleagues to China and also to Asia and anything else. Mr. Ambassador, please, your time.
Thank you very much indeed for the introduction and for the invitation to speak at this webinar hosted by the Universitas Indonesia, the School of Global and Strategic Studies. You have a major task to do at your school, of course. Global politics is everywhere these days. In the past, one could still imagine that one could hide from it in faraway regions or locked up spaces, but I think that age is over, and we need to therefore, as citizen, as policymaker, as academic, understand how the global strategies, the global policies affect us, our countries, our economies, and the future of the world. So thank you very much. I greet, of course, very particularly my counterpart for Indonesia in China, Ambassador Orat Mungkun. Very happy to meet you and see you there in beautiful Yunnan, which I visited once while I was posted in Hong Kong, this special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. So I'll speak a little bit from the vantage point of the EU's relations with China and towards China, and try to connect it also with some comments on the global context in which we find ourselves, and so I'll take it from there. And I think what is true for Indonesia and for ASEAN is also true for the European Union that the relations with China are crucial for any foreign policy of every one of us. It is for the EU, it's a relationship that is absolutely strategically important. And at the same time, it is the most challenging that we have, probably. And so the Deng Xiaoping is reported as saying that to seek truth, you have to do that, seek truth from the facts. So let's look at the facts of our relations. And first of all, the economy. China is for us the second biggest trading partner after the United States. Our bilateral trade is 1.5 billion euros per day. So that's 550 billion euros on a yearly basis in 2019. Add 15%, and then you have the US dollar. So you come to roughly 625 billion US dollars worth of trade between China and the European Union. That is absolutely massive. And so the investment relation is very strong likewise, with the EU having been the top ranking investor in China for quite some time, and with Chinese investment in Europe increasing as well. That's the economy. On the political side, of course, we have important commonalities with China on a number of global issues. For instance, the climate agenda, but also on a variety of regional or security issues, as well as on the agenda of sustainable development. So there is a very strong backdrop there. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves as Europeans frequently the questions about the reciprocal dimension of the relationship. We are pretty much open to any importer or investor from China. But how about the reverse angle? Is that the same? How many of our companies can operate in China outside a joint venture, as is the standard mode there? Are all sectors open for investment? And the answer is no. On research, how many European researchers can access China's top research programs, top universities? Vice versa, the European university sector research is open to the world. It's very liberal. European economies, European companies, European citizens expect that the European Union addresses this lack of what we see as a lack of reciprocal and balanced conditions in our relationship. This state of play was made clear in our most recent policy paper about the EU-China relations, adopted in March 2019. It's called the EU-China Strategic Outlook. It was drafted against the backdrop of China's growing economic power and its growing political influence. And it reviewed European Union-China relations and the related opportunities and challenges. Earlier, our approach towards China had been one of large-scale and somewhat unilateral engagement and opening up, on economic related topics. The new policy adopted in last year refines this, with of course a continuing, persisting, close and strong engagement towards China, an openness and a wish to expand the relationship, and at the same time a more stronger emphasis on a realistic, assertive and multifaceted approach. This approach also relates to our China relations with an angle towards the EU's own global competitiveness and security. In general, the strategy of the EU towards China is threefold, has three objectives. One, the EU should deepen its engagement with China to promote common interests at global level, but also based on clearly defined own interests and own principles of the EU. Two, the EU should robustly seek a more balanced and reciprocal conditionality governing the economic relationship. And three, in order to maintain the EU's prosperity, values and social model over the long term, there are areas where the EU itself needs to adapt to changing economic realities and strengthen its own domestic policies and its own industrial base, a topic that occasionally has been termed strategic autonomy. Indeed, ever since the new strategy was adopted by the member states, we have moved towards a more robust and more realistic approach towards China and recognized a degree of complexity in the relations, but also the necessity for principled pragmatism in dealing with China. The wind has been shifting not only at the EU level, but also at the level of individual EU member states, in the sense that several of our member states have aligned their national policies to the EU's multifaceted approach and now have developed their own China strategies on that basis. While fulfilling our part of the deal in the relations with China, we are now asking China more assertively than we did before to live up to its part, to deliver on its promises. This assessment that conditions need to change for Europe have also been conveyed and discussed with the Chinese leadership at the level of the EU-China summit last June, and also at the EU-China leaders meeting of last September. At the summit and at the leaders meeting, the EU leaders have called on China to walk the talk and translate its commitments into concrete actions. And certainly we have the impression that the Chinese leadership has heard the European call. In the history of EU-China relations, it is important to stress that we have never recorded such an intensification of high-level encounters. We have had two VTCs with President Xi Jinping, one of them together with the Prime Minister. We have had two high-level meetings with the Vice Premier Liu He. We've had a visit from State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and also from China's top diplomat and Politburo member Yang Jiechi in 7 European capitals. All of this in less than 3 months. Now, the fact that our bilateral relationship is developing in this way and is intensifying is not independent from the fast-paced and complex geopolitical context in which they find themselves. And as we all know, that geopolitical context has changed quite a lot even since the beginning of this year. Europeans are very realist about this. First of all, the COVID crisis. The COVID crisis has colored everything in our politics, in our economy, in our societies, and in our foreign relations. And as was noted by many observers, there is an element of competition in the post-COVID or vaccines policies of the major powers in the world. Another important dimension and factor impacting our policies is the increased US-China rivalry. And thirdly, we would also need to note developments within China itself that have affected the EU-China relationship. And here I refer particularly and most recently to the imposition of the national security law in Hong Kong. But first of all, the fast deteriorating US-China relationship risks englobing the European Union as one of its main battlegrounds. We see that those tensions between China and the US deepening as we go along, with clashes over all sorts of issues. The US-China strategic rivalry will probably be the determining or the dominant organizing principle for global politics for the period to come, regardless of who wins the next presidential election. And in that context, against that backdrop, the European Union will have to hold its nerve and frame its own EU policy approach. For the EU, for China, the priorities will probably remain at a global level to manage its relationship with the United States. But we think that it is possible that China's renewed interest towards Europe may find some origins in the tensions between China and the United States. For the EU, we will maintain very close relations with China, but also with the US. And it's important to stress that the EU is not equidistant between the two. At the end of the day, our transatlantic relationship with the United States runs deep and close, has a strong and long history, whatever the policy differences with the United States, between the United States and the EU are. The EU's High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, has written about this and about the position of the EU in between China and the US. He has written about this in an op-ed, you will find it on the website, called the Sinatra Doctrine of my way. Now, the title of the article expresses it all. It doesn't need much explanation, but in short, it means that the EU will wish and aim to do things in its own way, on its own term, rather than becoming dependent on any one country. COVID-19 has accelerated this dynamic. New challenges have emerged related to our overdependence on certain goods from abroad and our lack of resilience in a number of areas. It has also highlighted the risks for supply chains and for security. In other words, the EU's response to this increasingly challenging geopolitical context is essentially reflected in this concept of what I earlier mentioned, strategic autonomy. Our policy will be based on the defense of our values and interests, coupled with conscious choices recognizing our interdependence as a global partner. Relations with China are not an exception to that, and the summit that we had with the Chinese leadership in June and the leaders meeting in September have confirmed it. For us, 2020 was, in any circumstance, regardless of the external context, going to be a pivotal year for our China relations. It was going to be the year where we would work to get China to live up more to the commitments it had made in the framework of the summit of the year before, 2019. It would be the year where we would aim to redefine our engagement with China through the negotiation of a new strategic agenda for cooperation. And it would be the year where we would strengthen our resilience, our own leverage, by implementing the conditions and principles of our policy adopted in 2019 regarding the reciprocity dimension of our relations and their application of that principle of reciprocity in our internal market and trade decisions. Asked why he resumed relations with China in 1972, former US President Nixon replied that, taking the long view, we simply cannot afford to leave China forever outside the family of nations, there to nurture its fantasies, cherish its hates, and threaten its neighbors. 3 years later, the European Union opened diplomatic relations with China, and in 1975, we opened our first EU diplomatic mission to China. That's 45 years ago. Indonesia has celebrated its 70th anniversary this year. We are a bit younger in terms of the relations with China, but it is perfectly understandable. Engagement was and will remain the cornerstone of our relationship with China. We need and we want to engage with China as a cooperation partner on sustainable development, on climate change, on regional crises such as Iran and Afghanistan, and on so many other regional and global challenges. It has become very, very clear that, for instance, if you talk about the climate, we will not be able to successfully tackle the climate change without China. which is the emitter of about 28% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. The EU, economically as large as China in GDP terms, emits only 8% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, so that it's 20% less than China. And it means for us that we have to have China as a strategic partner on that goal of tackling climate change. But also in the context of the COVID-19 response, where we have a shared responsibility to participate in global efforts to stop the spread of the virus, boost research on treatments, on vaccines, and on strengthening the role of the World Health Organization. Also in that context, we need China as a partner. Talking about multilateral trade, we are in the process of a reform of the WTO, the basis of our rules-based trade order. And that reform will only have a future if China is on board and if the EU and China are working hands in hands. Those are some very important common objectives, some commonalities that will shape our future work together. But we are also realist. Besides partner of China, we're also a negotiating partner with China on defending and obtaining our interests. We do that every day in all sorts of areas. The aim we have is to have a more balanced economic relationship based on a level playing field and on greater reciprocity in these economic and trade and investment relations. This goes beyond our relations with China, as we as EU evaluate our relations in foreign policy according to the principle of reciprocity. For example, the rules that we impose on European companies, on our own markets within EU, particularly, for instance, as regards subsidization of companies, those rules that we apply to our firms, we also want and have to apply to non-European companies that want to enter our market. Otherwise, we would not have a level playing field. We are also a competitor of China, an economic competitor, particularly if you, as regards the new technologies. The highly contested and discussed term of systemic rivalry is also valid. It is a fact that China and the EU do not share the same histories, do not share the same constitutional makeups, do not share the same set of values and principles. Principles that, on our side, make the EU a democratic space with a set of liberal values that are also enshrined in our market economy. So that is a fact, and it does mean that on certain topics we will have to disagree with China if we stay true to our own values and principles. For instance, human rights. The issue of human rights remains one of the most divisive points in EU-China relations, and it underpins our different set of values. The situation in China has deteriorated as regards freedom of expression, human rights defenders, but also the situation in Xinjiang and Tibet. We have also witnessed during the last months unprecedented levels of social control of the citizens by health apps and neighborhood committees during the COVID-19 crisis in China. And while some controls and measures are needed to contain the disease, the question is whether such measures are proportionate. Restrictions on freedom of expression, which also led to the disappearance of citizens and journalists who were reporting about the outbreak management, are of serious concern to us. Relating to Hong Kong, the special administrative region, the adoption of the security law for Hong Kong on the 28th of May is, in our firm view, not in conformity with China's international commitments, in particular the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984. It seriously undermines the one country, two systems principle and the high degree of autonomy status of Hong Kong. In multiple occasions, the EU has reacted publicly and as 27 countries and in a transparent manner. And there have also been reactions by individual member states. Now, important in such a situation is dialogue. And fortunately, we have, as I mentioned before, had very intensive dialogues over the past half year. The leaders meeting, the VTC, on 14 September was an important opportunity to recall for us to recall all the EU's expectations for our bilateral relations. On trade and economic issues, we had a positive development with the signature of the EU-China agreement on geographic indications, something which we're also negotiating with Indonesia, by the way. The overall picture of the economic cooperation remains challenging. A lot remains to be done, and the EU reiterated during the summit meeting its call on China to deliver on WTO reform when it comes to industrial subsidies, when it comes to addressing overcapacity in the manufacturing industry, and also when it comes to improving market access so that European companies have the same access to the Chinese market as those of the United States under the US's Phase 1 deal. The key cooperative endeavor, which entails very complex and currently ongoing negotiations between us and China, is the Comprehensive Investment Agreement. China needs to engage on closing the remaining gaps, in our view. Significant progress has been made on a level playing field, but not on our market access and sustainable development so far. Our leaders have confirmed that we want to meet our common goal to conclude the agreement before the end of this year. During the summit, the EU also reminded that the strategic agenda for cooperation 2025 can only be concluded once significant progress has been made on the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. Overall, the EU leaders underlined to their Chinese counterparts the need for reciprocity and for level playing field, including in the area of science and technology. And we welcome China's agreement to continue the high-level digital dialogue with concrete progress to be sought. On climate change and biodiversity, the EU leaders encouraged China to strengthen its climate commitments, peaking earlier carbon dioxide emissions, setting the goal of climate neutrality domestically, establishing an emission trading system, as well as ending the construction of new coal-based power stations and their export. We also agreed to establish a high-level environment and climate dialogue and to pursue ambitious joint commitments on climate and diversity. Of course, as a remark on the side, to note China's statement statement of the President of China at the United Nations General Assembly about China's aim to be carbon neutral by the year 2060. Let me conclude by saying that our most recent leaders meeting with China was an important snapshot of where we stand in our relations with China, and I hope that my summary of the points discussed makes that clear. A snapshot of where we stand, but also a snapshot of our ambitions. There are prospects that we wish to pursue, and we are committed to that. But to achieve those prospects, we have to overcome significant difficulties. What matters is to have concrete deliverables and actions in order to deter the possible fatigue that we sometimes talk about, a fatigue that we don't make enough progress, that promises are not fulfilled, and as a result, we have too little to offer to our citizens in terms of substance. We have a very significant amount of work to be done before us, and it is important that our next high-level meetings are not calendar-driven, but rather the result of progress achieved. The EU Council of European Council, so that is to say the meeting of presidents and heads of states and heads of government of all the EU member states, had a discussion about China early this month and took stock of the aspects that I've mentioned and confirmed that the need to continue to strengthen our capacity to engage with China in a whole of government approach, an all of EU approach, with China being an absolutely unique and vital partner for us. Much lies ahead, but both the EU and China know how much work needs to be done to achieve the potential. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pickett. It's very, very comprehensive. Should be a lot of work to prepare, but thank you very much for your material. And it is good for Universitas Indonesia from various experts. I think it's going to be a kind of good to follow up a lot of issues, EUs and China, and of course some impact to Indonesia or other Asian countries. China with 1.4 billion population, and EU is around 450, kind of that. So altogether is 1.8 billion. But I think to some extent the unity in the COVID in the COVID outbreak. But in some in some table is you are touching a lot of economic, social, international, political, even social and culture, the different history, and so on and so on. But I'd like to hear actually the Francis Nasra My Way song from European side. Okay, friends, colleagues, and gentlemen. Now we are going to listen to my colleague, Einar Tangen. He is from China Global Television Network. Actually, Mr. Tangen is a US citizen based in Hong Kong. And you know, Hong Kong is also, this is Chicago University affiliations, Hong Kong based, And last week, I was very, very lucky to listen great lecture from Professor Mers. Mercier, kind of that. But the analysis is pretty, quote unquote, in my opinion, kind of staggering in the sense that we don't know to what extent is China and US is becoming, training his own muscle, becoming growing and growing and growing of the military, arena. In that case, we are lucky to have Einar taken. Actually, he's from China Global Television Network and also a main correspondent from many Asian issues at BBC. And I read his work. It's very interesting and very wide coverage. Please, Mr. Tahan, yours.
Thank you. I just want to clear up a few things. I live in Beijing. I have for 15 years, and I'm not actually an employee of CGTN. I'm an independent. I'm an independent commentator for political and economic affairs, and I scan over 24 different stations internationally. And any given month, I do about 12 different ones. So let me just launch into it. I really appreciate the views that were expressed by my colleagues on the panel. But I want to get right down to the meat of it. I think for a lot of people, looking at the situation, especially between Europe, America, and China, there is a sense, well, here you have about 15% of the world's population between the United States and Europe. They have about 2/3 of the world's wealth, okay? And they're still insistent, despite a history that we can call questionable. Let's talk about 2 world wars, colonialization. These were not exactly things you want to boast of. When you start talking about Hong Kong, you're talking about an area that was ripped from Hong Kong so that, in essence, the British and the US could, British in this particular case, could sell opium, would have the right to sell opium in China. So not exactly a place where you would be piously talking about European or American values in terms of history. This idea that, the world, the 85%, should kind of follow the 15% is still a kind of post-colonial idea. This sense that somehow, if you're European or American, you have a particular, lock on sensibility and what should happen. This was all put into this modernization theory that all countries, if they would just become democratic and capitalist, everything would be fine. But let's take a look a little bit at, democracy today. It's not exactly bringing the governments or the leaders that are necessary for these times. We could go over a litany of countries, both the US. I think there are a lot of concerns about Donald Trump, what he represents, the kind of populism that he brings. You could also look in Europe. I mean, I think people would have the same questions about Boris Johnson and so on. So there are real questions about just how effective, democracy is as an overall system. Then you get to capitalism. Capitalism is supposed to be about free markets. This is supposed to be an idea that, good things would happen if you just followed this process. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened. What you see now are, industries which are either too big to fail, have to be bailed out by the government, despite the fact that individuals, ma and pa back on the farm or in the city, lose their house, their savings, everything that they have. No one is bailing them out at this point. But these big industries, in any big industry cluster, you have 2 or 3 main players. You're seeing this play out right now in the United States in terms of the tech industry. There's the antitrust suit against Google, et cetera. So when 15% of the world is going out and proselytizing piously about how good the system that they're projecting is and how everyone should follow the rules and create a fair playing field. I'm sorry, I think most of people, the 85% of the rest of the world, are kind of wondering, because it's an asymmetric relationship. On one hand, you have the United States and Europe who have all the money and are trying to make the rules, and the rest of the world who's just trying to catch up. You know, it's a serious thing in Europe if you can't watch football. I think it's a serious thing in Indonesia when you don't have food to put on the table. I mean, they're both crises in their own way, but let us say that they're far, far removed. So when we put China into this mix, I think the thing that you should remember is that China has been, you know, a rebel. They have not followed the strict prescription of you know, of capitalism and democracy. They have some sort of hybrid system. They don't even know what to name it. They talk about it, Chinese with special characteristics, you know, capitalism with Chinese characteristics, etc. It's not fully formed. But for 40 years, it's been extremely successful. They've dealt with issues. And this was a country, remember, 40 years ago, they don't have a real bank. They don't have insurance companies. They don't have what we would call a functioning you know, economic system. And they don't have a lot of money. All they have is a huge labor dividend. Yet 40 years later, they've been able to transform that into becoming the second or first largest economy, depending, looking at nominal or PPE, in the world. So it is quite extraordinary. So why is this a problem? Well, the problem is that if I believe in America or in Europe that I have the best system, that democracy and capitalism are unbeatable, it's just the way it is. It's my faith is in that, all right? And you have an upstart that is doing well with the wrong system. You have a tendency to believe that they're doing something untoward, illegal, perhaps they're cheating, all right? Without actually putting it forward, showing exactly what they've done. In many of the cases that the EU brings, it's always about individual companies that are, you know, or individuals who are Chinese. And somehow all of their bad acts are attributed to the Chinese government. Now, there are cases in where the Chinese government, this is clear that there has been some action that is unfavorable to foreign firms. But you know what? China has done very well with that. If it had opened up its markets and just let American and Europeans play willy-nilly, where would it be today? It would be economically dominated by these big three groups who dominate practically every industry out there. I mean, how would that have helped China? So China represents this existential threat to the existing world order based on Eurocentric values, all right? So, you know, and if you're Eurocentric, that sounds great. But for the 80%, 85% of the rest of the world, perhaps it doesn't sound as great, especially given the inequalities that are out there. You know, what I heard from my European colleague was a long line of grievances about how unfair the world is to Europe. You know, Europe is wealthy. As I said, you know, they're worrying about their entertainment, not the food on the table so much. All right. So there's a disconnect between these ideas. And for many countries, I think the worry existentially, you know, especially as kind of dominant world order that the US and Europe pushes, is that other countries will see what China's doing. They're not going to do exactly what China's doing. Each country has its own particular strengths and directions, values, all right? But, you know, that they would start departing from the Holy Grail, from the faith, all right? And that this could lead to a deterioration in world order. Well, what is that world order? It's a world order that protects the top 15%. So these are alternative perspectives that should be considered before you start proselytizing about how everybody's unfair to you. I mean, Donald Trump, you know, on a nightly basis gets up there and talks about how he's a victim, how the US is a victim. I wonder how that sounds to somebody in Africa who doesn't have enough to eat, that the US, the most powerful military, political entity on earth, you know, with a, you know, a per capita GDP of over 57,000 US dollars per, you know, per person, you know, has been victimized You know, it's just terrible. We should feel sorry for them as they don't have enough to eat, as they can't get basic medical care. So, I mean, I think it's time for a change. I think it's basically there should be realism. If Europe is really concerned about the rest of the world and creating a fair playing field, well, then I would assume that they'd be willing to take some of their stockpiled cash and wealth and actually put it to use in places like what? Indonesia. Why? Well, there's a fairly long colonial history there that was asymmetrical, that benefited Europeans. I mean, I'm not saying they have to do it, but if in fact they're concerned about creating a better world, the question is, what are they doing about it other than insisting that, yes, you know, the top 15% should be kept in place because we know better than you. So this is an extreme, perhaps seen as an extreme view, but it does have some resonance, I think, in the rest of the world. And it's one of the chief reasons why you're starting to see this incredible kickback between US and Europe and China. They sense China as an alien threat that could get the rest of the herd unsettled, move them towards independence in ways that are not acceptable to the top 15%. Hey, it could even result in the top 15% losing their preeminent position. Wouldn't that be terrible? So I will leave it at that. I've said a lot of controversial things. I would like to have some response from anybody, my fellow speakers, also anyone from the audience. And hopefully I can defend rationally all the things that I've said. Unfortunately, I do have a meeting at 4, not a meeting, but I have a show I have to go to at 4. So that's why I want to keep it short. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Einar. It's very interesting chat, actually, for, I think, for everybody's, and especially for Indonesians audience, because sometimes Indonesia, to some extent, is always, in my opinion, it's very difficult positioning themselves, kind of komsi komsa, Western or East or Asia, but your shot is a kind of we do have a kind of now it's time of change. Time is changed now, and new realisms. But the speed is make everybody scary actually for China. I still remember in the mid 70s, yeah, I think income per capita, GDP per capita, Indonesia, a lot of Asian countries, and also China is almost the same, 60 or 75. But now is China is almost 10,000, but Indonesia is still 4,000. I still keep teasing my student, come on, how the China is kind of flying, not just to the moon, but probably to the Mars. Right, everybody, this is very interesting. We still have 1 hour. Einar already throw the ball to some extent, asking, sorry to say, Ambassador Pickett to respond, or anybody else in the audience, because I'm pretty sure here is my colleague from other faculty also here, and a lot of, to some extent, is a lot of issues we think for hours in University of Indonesia. To an extent, for example, is you rejected Einar on, of course, we are different in political value, social value, and history, but now is we in this case is China can show to the world that this is a kind of harvest harvest seasons. I hope this harvest seasons is continue sustainable without creating, telling you frankly, scary if US and China, United States and China is make something on the our area, Southeast Asia. make it scary actually. Now can we give to the panelists to just throw short question for, to some extent, Ainaro, we very glad if Ambassador Pickett is a bit respond, and also especially for Ambassador Jauhari, to what extent Indonesia can, reap a lot of benefit, with relation with China. I don't know, probably Ambassador Jauhari first, just in case Ambassador Pickett or Ainar got something you'd like to respond. Please, Pak Jauhari.
Thank you very much. That's the reason why I love to have a dinner with Einar in Beijing, because during the dinner we always had a rich discussions. I think the last time we had a dinner, it was, I think, in July, Einar. Yes, every country, every society has their own system. You don't have to try to impose your own system and educate others to follow you. That I did remember during the 1995 when we established the WTO, and then we discussed the issue of investment. And then it has to be a level playing field. How come you discuss a level playing field on investment for the 15% with we in Asia and some countries in Africa? For that very reason that we ask for the transitional period. For that very reason that the negotiation of the China become a member of the WTO took like 7 or 8 years. In many cases, these things happen. So once again, thank you, Einar, for the discussions or for some thought-provoking issues that you expressed this afternoon. Let me talk about the Indonesia and China. Yes, we have to reap the benefit out of the cooperation without interfering into the political system or social system of one country. That is very clear expressed between two governments, between two leaders, in every time they meet or in every time they had a conversation. That's the reason why in many occasions we agree on the principle of collaboration and cooperation without interfering into the domestic politics of each country or domestic system of each country, because it's completely different. You cannot educate us or you cannot intervene us by telling that our system much more better than your system, because Pancasila is Indonesia. We cannot as well ask other countries to follow our Pancasila. Pancasila is fully fit for Indonesia. So that's the reason why I did remember in September, because I read it, in September 1948, our founding fathers came up with the idea of rowing between two reefs, mendayung di antara dua karang. That was in the 1948. 72 years ago. Now we are mendayung di antara berbagai karang. So rowing among many reefs. So this very simple question is, do not hit the reefs. You will be destroyed. So this is the principle by our founding father, President Sukarno, and this is from Mr. Muhammad Hatta during the time. So this is the principles that we continue to implement in the many reefs now. Do not hit your sampan to the reefs. Kalau enggak, then you will be destroyed. So within that context that we continue to have a better cooperation, try to reap the benefit out of the cooperation with China. As I already expressed to you, we just had a meeting here, a very open and honest conversation between two leaders, among the delegations, between private sectors as well. There are many things will happen in the future in Indonesia that will bring benefit to both people, Indonesia and China. That's my very short comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. this please for young generations, especially in the Universitas Indonesia, be careful. There's so many rifts right now. So not just two, west and east, but now it's many rifts. Okay. I'm ready and invite the
I'm happy to respond. I feel that I've not just finished my talk, so I was slow to take the floor, but I will, since Mr. Einar has so eloquently also addressed the EU. And I respect what he said, but I fundamentally disagree with much of it. And I think it's simply not the case that the EU sees the relations with China in terms of a battle of systems. We see different systems. We recognize that China will not wish or will not soon have a system of governments that resembles ours closely. And we may regret that, and we may criticize certain aspects of it, certain expressions of that system, but ours is not the goal to come and overtake at all. So it is rather the opposite. Our goal is to work as closely as we can with China on the many things that bind us together, whether we want it or not, and on the many things we want to do together as a sheer political drive to use the reciprocal powers, the reciprocal weight in the world to achieve certain things. So we know that China has had a magnificent development story over the past 40 odd years, truly fantastic, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, becoming a world economic powerhouse of the first order, a technological powerhouse, what have you. Rising in its role on the world stage, and we welcome that, and that is the rightful drive of any sovereign country in this world. Realize the potential. Indonesia has that drive in a similar way, different but similar. 2045 high income country, fantastic. We support it. And we work together with the authorities to help them do that. The EU knows that it has a role to play in helping the emerging economies or the developing economies find that pace. Let me remind Mr. Einar, we are consistently year after year the #1 development aid donor in the world. And this is grant aid. This is not loans. This is grant aid, untied, not linked to companies, not linked to projects that then have bear the flag of the EU. No, projects of the governments that we work with. That's one. Secondly, for the developing world, we have the freest system regime for imports in the EU. The least developed countries have a regime of 0% tariff for everything but arms. That is the phrase, everything but arms. 0% tariffs across the board. Now, if that is not a statement of European solidarity with the developing world, then I don't know what statement one can find. Research. The European Union operates a research program, the largest research cooperation program in the world. It is open to the world. It is open to China. It's open to Indonesia. It's open to countries elsewhere in Asia. It's open to Africa. And why? Simply to educate future generations of researchers, innovators, which will mean depth investments in their countries. Now, where is the friction between the European Union and China? Is in those areas where we feel that China has simply outgrown its developing identity, or its emerging identity, emerging economy identity that it used to have, and is now simply to be treated as a country that is developed and has the same competitive power as does the EU or the United States or whoever. So in other words, we have to treat China as an equal partner. So the frictions that we see now is something that reflects reflects the fact that the EU calls on China to live up to commitments, to obligations, if you like, under trade regimes, bilateral or international, that apply to developed economies. And that is the reason why the EU simply cannot accept that our companies, our economies, our jobs in Europe suffer from unfair competition from state-subsidized companies that almost, zero rates or very low rates export their goods to the European Union. Why would we? Why would we accept that? No, we want open trade, but on fair terms. And that is the dialogue that we are having with China in the same way, as you have noted, as we're having it with the United Kingdom right now for the future trading relationship. It's a similar approach, whether it's the UK, our former member states, and our very close partner, as well as for China. So the same for the WTO. It's a organization that thrives only when we all play ball, and where everybody not only accepts the rules on paper, but also implements them at home. And there we have, we see China as our partner, and we want to see China's role in the WTO present, but we also expect that all partners must, we have a fair and equitable relationship. Last word on Indonesia, which you mentioned. Let me, the EU, just in the past 6 months, 200 million euros. So that is plus 15%, and you have the dollar. So you're 230 million US dollars. The rupiahs equivalent, you'll work out. 200 million from the EU, by the EU as such, and by the EU member states jointly, for the Indonesian response to COVID. And what do we do with that? It's about 20 million of grants for civil society organizations, for work for the vulnerable, etc., marginalized groups, and it is 180 million, a mixture of loan and grant for 2 large hospitals in East Java and in South Sulawesi. For ASEAN, over the past 6 months, 800 million euros for the all 10, and that includes the Indonesian money. I stop there.
Thank you, Ambassador Pickett. Of course, we'd like to have a short response from Einar, but before that, I think recalling to Professor Mearsheimer from Chicago, Ambassador Pickett quote unquote restated that European country is not anymore a kind of to have the attitude, if don't like with other countries, to change the so-called government. But that's different with the United States. that's stated clearly by Professor Mearsheimer that there is a kind of habit from the U.S. Government. If they don't like to enter other countries, they change the government. Now, my question to Einar is, what do you think the China's positions? But of course, even Prime Minister Mahathir telling the public that the China is not not have history of colonialism like a colleague from Europeans. But I don't know if the power is going to be strong and everybody needs some more to fill up consumption behavior in China. Einar?
Well, okay. First off, the EU has supported regime change. They participated in our wars in Afghanistan and also in Iraq and things like that. So it's not always there. Now, they were following us, and I think they did so in most cases reluctantly, and I give them credit for that, but it still doesn't take away the fact that they were involved. Second, in terms of China, China has, as everyone says, a history of looking inward, not outward. But you never know exactly what a country is going to do when it reaches the apex of its power. I mean, certainly the United States, no one expected it to be where it is today. It was dragged into 2 world wars. And that has been part of this mindset that says, why, we're celebrating, or not celebrating, I should say, it's the commemorating the anniversary of the Korean War. And that was a contentious fight between this. But what was the theory behind it? The U.S. had good intentions. What they saw is a world that whenever they try to walk away from it, there would be a world war. So MacArthur said, look, I know the answer. We're going to conquer the whole world. And the whole world would adopt, democracy and capitalism, and everything will be just fine. So he marched through Japan. His idea was to go through Korea and then China, and then these are just to secure his supply lines, and then march into what he saw as the real enemy, Russia. So this was, quote, good intentions based on, we have to end all of these being dragged into these wars. But it really didn't take into account the national identities and sovereignty of these countries themselves. It just basically said, we know, and you should. And nothing really has changed since that time. So, what will China do? I don't know. But I can tell you that so far, they have not been ideological. No one in China runs around saying, oh, you have to copy us. Listen, if you get a loan from us, you have to do these, adopt these policies. You have to do what we tell you to do. So that is an indication. But I'm not going to go out there and say, I guarantee China's always going to do the right thing. As their economic footprint increases, it's going to be very hard for them to walk away when you have a political change in government that doesn't favor them. They might try to get involved. I don't know. But I'm not one of these people who says, piously that everything I do is right. I mean, for instance, the EU, he says no subsidy. Well, that would be news to Airbus. It would also be news to all the farmers who receive agricultural subsidies and things like that. So I don't believe in this kind of pious idea that everything my country does is right. I think we have to take off the veil and see things for the way they are and just judge them based on people's actions. What are they trying to do? I mean, giving a few crumbs to somebody so that you can eat the majority of the bread does not qualify for me as good intentions. Yes, I think it's wonderful that the EU has given money to help in COVID-19, but that's part of a world responsibility. And when you and your neighbor, the US, have 2/3 of the world's wealth, yes, I would expect that would be the case, especially since the pandemic actually threatens your economic empire and also the health of your own country. So there is a collective responsibility, but don't pass it all off as altruistic. We're doing the right thing. You should be thankful and follow our example. Let's just be clear about what is involved.
Thank you, Einar. That's a very good point as well. Now is 30 minutes to go. I think I have a chance to look at the Q&A and answer. Let me read There's only 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah. Please panelists attention on this. Hi, this is Mark Wang, Director of Center for Contemporary Chinese Studies, University of Melbourne. Oh, this Ibu Evi's colleague in Melbourne, because University of Indonesia would like, doing a kind of research actually on China. Thank you for organizing such an event. So others critically important. He's asking about the BRI actually. What are we talking about is the potential BRI collaboration between the largest communist country and the largest Muslim countries in the world. Will the Indonesia-China's BRI project bring two countries further together and produce a new model of development collaborations? That's one. Second one, in practice or at the operation level, how to incorporate the BRI projects in Indonesia with Indonesia's global maritime Fulcrum. I should ask my colleague who is expert in maritime Fulcrum actually. I don't know this because in Arabic. Dear speaker, seeing the growth of China's economics in all aspects of life, could we say that China is the next superpower? Thanks. But of course, you can see from now. Thank you, sir, especially Ambassador Ratmangun, for the knowledge. This is really an interesting discussion. My question is, as we know, that China still uses a socialism ideology. Only for the market, they open door policy, change their perspective into liberal capitalism. Isn't that will affect the compromising our ideology resilience? This is domestic politics. Okay. The last question is, while China growth in economics have benefited its neighbor in Asia, its neighbor are concerned with geopolitical dynamic that also come with such growth. Taken a regional level, specifically within the Indo-Pacific, what kind of asymmetric multilateral construct does China want to build? I think this is going to be one semester answer actually, but let's give the privilege for to answer Ambassador Ratmangun.
I think maybe Einar first, because he has to leave by 4. Einar first, because you have to leave by 4. Yeah, please.
Einar, please do. Einar.
Okay, let's take it in order. In terms of China relations with its neighbors, I think it's very important that Indonesia band together with ASEAN so that they don't have this asymmetrical relationship. You really need to have a powerful group dealing with a very powerful country. China is already a superpower, but not in the way that the US and EU is, because their GDP per person is about 10,000 versus over 50, 60,000 for EU. So there's a lot of difference. This idea that somehow it's not a developing nation just because it's past the cusp of the middle income trap is probably not correct. In terms of how people should treat China, you should band together. You should have your own goals and analysis involved, prepared. You should go to China and you should make a deal, and it should be an equal deal. This is not about China should reign supreme over everybody. They're interested in trade. They're very pragmatic. All right. And it's an opportunity for countries that want to do it. Now, RCEP is looming this year. That could be very, very beneficial, especially in a regional context, all right, to lessen things, but still give countries, a little bit more leeway to decide what is politically sensitive within their own countries. And this is very, very important. There's too much of this idea that somehow one organization or one group should dictate the world. I don't think that China does that. In terms of the religious issue, Islam versus China, which is secular, or not secular, but I should say agnostic, I don't think that's really the issue. I think people are trying to make it an issue by pointing out issues about Xinjiang, etc. But I think in the end of the day, China is trying to create a sense of greater, everybody being Chinese instead of being separate entities. And I think that's very important for every single country, and including Indonesia. You want to have a sense that people feel they're Indonesians first, but they have different religions, different races, all right, different sets of beliefs. They want to have their children educated in a different way. But as long as you can respect and have that centralized identity, then you can go forward as a nation. If you allow your minorities or small groups to be created into divisive elements, fifth columns within your societies, it's going to be very, very difficult to go forward as a whole.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have to go. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you, Einar.
Both Michaels
See you in
and
Beijing.
everybody. Take care. Will do. Bye-bye.
We keep in
Bye-bye.
touch with you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Pak Johari dulu atau Pak Piket dulu? Ya,
Pak Komara.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Just to let you know that one of the participants here is the scholar Nahdlatul Ulama. His name is Imran Hamid. I would like, if it's possible, Pak Imran to contribute as well concerning the I think question number one about the collaboration between a majority Muslim country with the communist country, because he has some ideas on that. Number two, for me, the BRI collaborate with the Global Maritime Fulcrum. We discuss into the details. That's the reason why we came up with the 4 economic corridor. It's in because not in Java or in the most developed countries, right? Not Sumatra, not Kalimantan, not Sulawesi region, not Sulawesi, and Bali for tourism purpose. In North Sumatra, manufacture and infrastructure, North Kalimantan, manufacture and infrastructure, and in North Sulawesi. So North Sulawesi will cover eastern part of Indonesia, and then north, because of the issue of the new capital, so North Sumatra and North Kalimantan, and then of course North Sulawesi, and some of the project that we call it non-economic corridor project, such as fast train from Jakarta to Bandung, and other projects as well, infrastructure. We discuss in details, and then and in the same level playing field. So the China interest is to come to Indonesia, and then in our interest represented by Bappenas, and of course it has to go through the planning, Indonesian plan as well in Indonesia, of course. So this is the reasons why we are not rushed into the cooperation, but we start with the feasibility studies. We identified 4th economic corridor, etc., etc. So we discuss in details about the cooperation within the context of the BRI. And other things concerning the regional architecture, yes, this is the reason why I think in 2011 we came up with the Bali principles to include other major players to join the ASEAN driving force to create a not political, but peaceful region in the Southeast Asia and East Asia. And I think within that context that we have a cooperation as well with European Union and other major power in the world. So this is, we call it the ASEAN-driven activities. This is the main issue within the context of the Indo-Pacific as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question.
Thank you.
I have a question on when you're talking about North Kalimantan. Is it related to the new capital, Penajam?
No, it's not in the new capital, but close to the new capital. New capital is in Kalimantan Timur.
Timur, but north. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah. Before Ambassador Pickett, let me ask my colleague, Pak Imron. He's from Nahdlatul Ulama.
Pak Imron, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Can you share your observation, the kind of the chemistry Islamic in Indonesia with the secular China and so on and so on. Please, Pak Imron.
Okay, before I give the answer about your question, firstly, let me introduce myself as a head of a special branch of Nahdlatul Ulama to China for the 2 terms, I think, from the 2016 till now. I will use this chance to first launch my question to the panelists before I just give the answer of the question from
Ambassador
from the Pak Komara. During the last 3 years, in my terms, when I'm in Nahdlatul Ulama, the head of Nahdlatul Ulama to China, we did a lot of cooperation between the Chinese people, Chinese Muslim people, and our colleagues in Indonesia, especially of PBNU, the Central Board of Nahdlatul Ulama in Jakarta, including to launch a book of Islam in China. I think it's one of the way to improve the cooperation between China's people and Indonesian people, especially in Muslim, especially in Muslim people in Indonesia. But I think it needs the support from the government, both from China and Indonesian government, to enlarge the cooperation between the 2 people. And I just to jump to launch our question to my question to the panelists about this webinar. As we know, when China influence is growing strongly in international stage through the BRI and USA and another countries, so-called what's happening now in South China Sea tension, so-called the Quad. Yeah? Quad is the quadrilateral security dialogue, comprised of Australia, India, Japan, and United States. I think it's interesting to discuss further in this webinar what Indonesia should do regarding this BRI and quadrilateral security dialogue. It's kind of another great wall comprised of Australia, India, Japan, and United States to block the China's influence in this region. What Indonesia should do? This is my question to Ambassador Ratmangun. Thank you, Pak Komara.
Okay.
I stop it.
All right. I think, thank you very much, Pak Imran, your interventions. Noted, actually. Would like to Pak Jauhari dulu atau Pak Piket?
Pak Piket first.
Okay. Pak Ambassador Piket, please respond to the hold's question from the floor. Then Pak Ambassador Ratman. Yeah.
Okay, I've now missed the question from the floor that you want me to respond to, but was it about the BRI?
The thing is related to the Quad.
Ah.
Yeah, that's the last one. But it is better to if you refer your reference to 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Sorry.
Yeah. I didn't take them all down. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, don't worry.
But yeah, no.
I think about the global influence of China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what
well, it's an evident fact that China's influence around the world has grown tremendously as a result of its economic strength, and that is totally natural. That is natural in bilateral terms, in regional terms, and in multilateral terms. And it is for that reason that the EU is so keen to work with China, to have a solid partnership with China, because we have interests in common. We have interests that divide us, where we are competitors, as I noted before, but there are so many things on which EU and China can cooperate in the global context, on the multilateral climate and sustainable development agenda, on the regional approaches to security, Afghanistan, Iran, of course, a very important topic as well, where China and EU are partners in the joint agreement that we had signed and that was unfortunately abandoned by the United States. So China's growing weight is of course something that can be helpful for us, and that opens the window to what I earlier called this potential that of further partnership that we haven't yet fully utilized, but are intent on doing so. On the South China Sea, on the regional security infrastructure, the EU is a very strong partner of ASEAN in Southeast Asia. It's it's very natural. ASEAN is in its conception, in its makeup, in its ballpark missions and objectives has so many similarity with us that it makes ASEAN for the EU the cornerstone, the hallmark of the security infrastructure for the region. ASEAN's centrality, it's a notion we agree to, a notion that is flexible. There's different ASEAN plus modalities, and that has worked very well. The EU is also part of that. As a dialogue partner of ASEAN, so we wish to go further. We want to develop a strategic partnership with ASEAN. So that is for us the core of the security approach to this region. We have plenty of things that we can develop in the defense and the security area between us and ASEAN, partly a function of the needs of ASEAN, partly a function of the needs of the EU and of the EU's growing security and defense identity. Won't go into detail, but that is a very steady development that we see on the EU side, this defense identity and security identity. So it makes us probably also from the ASEAN perspective a more interesting partner to work with. All the more so because we have no other agenda but stability and security in your region. On the quarter, I have no specific comments to make, to be honest, at this point. Belt and Road. I was in Hong Kong when the initiative was first announced, and it was very interesting to see it take shape in these early days. Also with the lending bank, whose acronym I now forget, but was set up, and so the Belt and Road initiative was mirrored by the EU around the same time, as a matter of fact, by a policy paper on connectivity from our side. So basically talking about very, very similar things, but then from the European perspective, with European priorities and modalities, and so it is certainly absolutely true that we need connectivity. We need more links between our regions, between EU and China, but also the wider Asian region in all respects. It's not just infrastructure, but it is everything else. It's in the markets. It's in the market harmonization or market facilitation, the customs procedures. So it's not just hard infrastructure, but also the soft infrastructure of trade, of transport, of people-to-people contacts and movements, research, and so on. How do you deal with patents that are developed from joint research projects? Since we are cooperating more on research, we have to deal with these things, with these questions. Otherwise, the drive behind such research is less. So we are also very insistent on abiding by what we think are the bottom line rules for such projects in terms of WTO compatibility, sustainability, equal competition for firms in such projects, while taking on board the development notion of the Belt and Road initiative. So we're keenly interested with also a perspective from the EU with our own approach as well. Have I answered the 4 questions? I don't know.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Pickett. Now, Ambassador Ratmangun.
Thank you very much, Pak Komarajaya. Thank you, Ambassador Vincent Pickett. Yeah, I fully share your views about the cooperation between the European Union and ASEAN. We have a strong cooperation that I did remember back in the 2007, 2008, during the negotiation of the ASEAN Charter. We emulate, in fact, some of the elements, and maybe most of the elements coming from Brussels. So yes, we have a cooperation during the negotiation on the establishment of the ASEAN Peace and Reconciliation Institute. I think we discuss a lot of things and experts coming from the European Union as well. So yes, till now, I think become stronger and stronger cooperation between ASEAN and European Union. So I fully share your views, in particular to maintain peace and security in the region. That's the reason why we call it the regional architecture in East Asia. And of course, a lot of discussion being held as well within the context of the East Asia and European Union. So I fully share your views on that. As to the Belt and Road initiatives, yes, concerning the infrastructure, it's linked as well with the ASEAN Master Plan on Infrastructure. This is one of the issues that was discussed when I expressed my views that within the context of Indonesia and China, within the context of the Sinergizing, the Belt and Road Initiative, and Global Maritime Fulcrum. So we came up with the 4 economic corridors. Within the context of the ASEAN, yes, of course, we discussed as well the BRI and ASEAN Master Plan and on connectivity, and within that context as well, that some of the European countries participated actively as well during the summit of the BRI, both in 2017 and recently April 2019 in Beijing. I think some countries in member of the European Union actively participated, even IMF, World Bank, etc. So I think from those perspectives that we have to see the cooperation within the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. As to the question by my dear friend, Pa Imran Hamid, first of all, happy Santri Days, because today is the Santri Days, Pa. So happy Santri Days first, because I was conducted interview this morning with the Nahdlatul Ulama on Santri Days. So now I remember. Congratulations, Pa. So as to the Indo-Pacific outlook, of course, because we are the proponent of the Indo-Pacific and now become ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook. So we would like to pursue the idea of the Indo-Pacific outlook within the context of the East Asia as well. Of course, Quad, they have proposals, but from ASEAN, from Indonesia, we have the ASEAN outlook Indo-Pacific, as already expressed during my presentations. This is the issue, the idea that's going to be discussed during the summit of ASEAN and ASEAN partners. If I'm not mistaken, it will be held by November this year. So of course, during the process of the negotiations, like what happened in 2011 when we were the chair of the ASEAN, came up with the Bali Declaration on the regional architecture, and some of the elements of the Bali Declaration now transpired in the ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook. So for ASEAN, for Indonesia, this is the sort of idea that we would like to pursue within the context of the East Asia. So that is my answer to Pa Imran Hamid.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ratmangun. So, friends, colleague, and gentlemen, ladies, now is 3:26, almost 2 hours and a half. We are discussing a lot, actually. I think for colleague in the University of Indonesia, this kick-off is a kind of so many issues that we can, follow up later on for your research or for your interest, and we can so make a kind of networking on this, because unavoidable China is growing and growing and growing, that the impact is not just to Asia, but also to the global context. Let me convey my thank you very much, His Excellency Ambassador Joharo Ratmangun. Long not to see you, yeah?
Yes,
because
I did remember. We met when you was in the military, long time ago.
Okay, and also thank you very much indeed to Ambassador Vincent Pickett for your contribution, and also for sharing your, position of EU to China, which is for us is very important, and to some extent, probably we can learn as well how to deal with with China. Although our colleague Ainar is remind us now is everybody's going to in Indonesia is kind of jati diri. Don't forget. Pak Ator, thank you very much also for you still here. I do hope.
Yeah, sure. This is a very interesting discussion. Yeah, yes.
I do
Thank
hope.
you, Ambassador Vincent.
I think
Vincent, nice to know you, Ambassador Vincent.
And also for Ambassador
Johari.
Everybody call me Joe. Everybody call me Joe.
No, actually, Pak Ator is from management science, and of course, a lot of dealing with the private companies. So I think if you're in China, in China, and also in EU, we can sit together to to make some a lot of activities actually.
Sure. From the perspective of our school, we will support this, Pak Kumara.
Okay, thank you, Pak. And again, Humphrey, thank you for helping
I have
us.
a question to Mr. Ambassador.
1 minute, half minute.
Yes. Ambassador Vincent, I have a question to you. You know what? U.S. election incoming soon, right?
Oh,
and I want to ask you the future of EU-US relation and its impact on EU view on China, given the fact that some EU leaders are not happy with Trump. If Trump re-elected again, what do you think about the future of EU-US relation? For instance, in an interview with Guardian, Merkel said that the US military presence in Central Europe was in the US interest. It's not for his ally in Europe. So I just want to know your opinion regarding that, Mr. Vincent.
So, withdrawing from the public, please, Ambassador Pickett.
No, I'll be very brief. It's you're opening a very totally new, large agenda there, and first of all, I'm not going to speculate about the outcome of the election. But secondly, as I mentioned in my talk, regardless of what the outcome will be, there will, in our assessments, continue to be a friction between China and the US. It's not going to be changing anytime quickly, but the EU will continue to find its my way in that in that context, and that's I think what we will be doing, and of course we will follow very, very closely. Some of the I should restate that the very strong and transatlantic links between Europe and the United States, and they go back way back, the war and post-war periods, etc. So that is a very strong link that we will continue to build on, and we have many respects together with the United States. In the past 4 years, we have seen too much unilateralism from the United States as well. Yes. WTO, climate, and several Iran.
NATO also, right? The US want to pull out from NATO.
Yes. So we hope that will evolve over the next period. Whoever will be the president.
I thank you very much. I do appreciate your comment, Mr.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pickett.
Pleasure.
I think next webinar should invite colleague from United States Embassy.
Yeah. Discuss more.
I'd like to transfer to my director, Pak Ator, to close the event. Silakan, Pak. No. Just thank you and yeah. Okay, silakan, Pak.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Pak Komara. Thank you again from on behalf of our school. We would like to thanks to the speaker, His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piquet. Thank you again, and also His Excellency Mr. Jauhari, and all the participants. Thank you again, and we hope we can have another interesting discussion for the next few time. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pak.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best.
All the best.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you, Mr. Motor.
Thank you, Pak. Ya,
Saya,
thank you very much.
Saya pamit juga ya, Bapak-bapak.
Monggo sami-sami, Pak. Ya, yuk.
Thank you very much.
Terima kasih.
Signoriator, ci vediamo.
Ci vediamo.
Buona serata.
Buona serata. Buona serata. Agale.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to an end of the first SKSK University of Indonesia China webinar series. On behalf of the organizing committee and the School of Strategic and Global Studies, Universitas Indonesia, I thank you very much for your kind attendance, support and active participation for today's webinar. It's been a pleasure to host this event, and I wish you a pleasant day. I'm looking forward to seeing you again on our next China webinar series. Thank you and have a good day.
Terima kasih, Jehan.
Yuk, mari Pak.
Yuk, close ya kameranya. Oke, bye. Makasih, Ampri. Semua makasih ya. Oke.